Hi, this is Bill Saltmarsh, Vice President of Enterprise Data and Transformation and Chief Data Officer at Children's Mercy, Kansas City. And you're listening to Experiencing Data with Brian T. O'Neill.
You're now experiencing data with Brian O'Neill. Experiencing Data explores how product managers, analytics leaders, data scientists, and executives are looking at design and user experience as a way to make their custom enterprise data products and analytics applications more useful, usable, and valuable. And now, here's your host, the founder and principal of Designing for Analytics, Brian O'Neill.
Welcome back to Experiencing Data. This is Brian T. O'Neill. Today I have the Chief Data Officer from Children's Mercy in Kansas City, Bill Saltmarsh, with me. How's it going, Bill?
Going really well. Thanks, Brian. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I was talking to one of your staff, Anna, who I know you guys have worked with in the past, or I actually didn't know that till she told me. And she was talking about running this kind of product operating model at Children's Mercy in Kansas City. And I'm always interested in these origin stories and where this started. She said, well, Bill decided he wanted to kind of run the team this way. And I'm always like, people don't just wake up and decide to do this one day. So I wanted to get your origin story and kind of understand where you're coming from with this, because it's not the normal way that analytics and data science teams are typically doing the work of building these decision support solutions and analytics solutions and things of this nature using data to streamline operations, et cetera. So welcome to the show. Tell me a little bit about the origin story. Like, where did this start?
Yeah, I love this. This makes me think of challenging times, but really hopeful, kind of like discovery moments for me. Mm-hmm. I think about, I cut my teeth as a professional, as a data analyst, and as an analytics engineer before it was really a real thing. So one of the things that I experienced in those roles as individual contributors is I just wanted the ability, the systematic and consistent ability to connect my work, my tasks, to something that's impactful and meaningful organizationally. And so I always felt like there was this gap between like what people requested and what people actually used, and being on the front line of like that dynamic was enlightening, because it allowed me for sort of like experiment with, well, how can I get a better version of the original request, and kind of push back a little bit and kind of interrogate like the problem space a little bit before I start working on this thing. And lo and behold, I started discovering that this is a common viewpoint in terms of like analysts who kind of like think critically about the work that they do and try to connect it to something bigger. Started finding people that had similar sensibilities about the work. And then it became known to me that there was like data as a product mindset and a developing framework and an emerging way of practicing this work that was much more meaningful to me. And so from an early time in my career, I always was attracted to these sets of concepts of data as a product. And then as I became a leader of data functions, and then enterprise data and analytics functions, and then AI strategy and those types of things, kind of bigger picture organizational constructs, it allowed this concept of data as a product became a framework by which I could help my team members understand that there's a better way of utilizing their skills and their experiences and their expertise to drive value for their stakeholders and their users and their colleagues, by just empowering them to kind of push back on what was requested of them, give them a little bit more leeway and latitude to kind of use critical thought and understand the problem space before they start developing solutions, to become much more of a contributor, a meaningful contributor, an impactful contributor, rather than a producer of widgets, dashboards, data sets, data models. All of that stuff is important, but a lot of it misses the mark if you don't interrogate the problem itself that we're trying to solve. And so it became this, again, from a leadership perspective, it's like this ability to kind of connect the work to a higher degree of autonomy and then create a better set of valuable assets accordingly, which to me that's a big manifestation of my leadership principles, is connecting my team's work to the most impactful outcomes that we can produce.
Were any of your past employers or positions that you were in, were you in a climate where this work was happening, or were you doing this work individually, and then when you reached the position you're in now, you decided to like scale this downwards and widewards, whatever the word is for that. You know what I'm saying, to disseminate this way of thinking. But I'm just curious if this is kind of like I'm working in isolation but I think this is the right way to do it. And then you're proselytizing, or were you in an environment where others were doing this? Like, tell me a little more about that.
So I was the first sort of data team member hired at an advanced startup. Mm-hmm. And so I was in this like position of, I had this skill and capability that a lot of people needed because they needed access to data to drive, product decisions or finance decisions or whatever the things were. Right. And so but I had this very finite capacity. And so I was at this crossroads as a contributor, like, do I just kind of churn and burn, like whatever I can do, just to, like, get it out the door? Or do I try to figure out a way of maximizing the utility of my time and my resources? What can I do to make the most possible impact? And so that's kind of how it started with me. Is like, I based on a lot of things about me and my sensibilities about work and that type of thing, I gravitated more towards the latter, which is like, how can I just maximize my contributions? And so that became like a set of practices. And again, like, as I kind of like employed these practices and learned that I'm not alone in this space in the data and analytics world, they became refined over time. And then I met people that are really much more adept at this whole thing too.
Yeah, I want to ask about how you scale, how you're kind of scaling this across the team, and whether or not everybody adjusts how they work, or you have like a small group of product managers and you leave some of the implementation people kind of in their original working mode. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But before I do that, I know one of the challenges that like some, if we call them data product managers, whether they have the title or not, this pushing back, this asking why this way, why not this way, what decisions are you trying to make, that can introduce some flack. Like, that's not your job. Why does it matter? What difference does it make what the value is? I need this to get my job done, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Can you talk to me about, is that a cultural problem that needs to be dealt with management, or is that a necessary stepping stone, a maturity that, all people like yourself, you have to cross over that, like like the knight crossing the Indiana Jones, where you have to walk across the invisible bridge to get to the other side. Like, tell me about that.
There's two things that come to mind with that. One is, broadly speaking, this is like industry agnostic. If you're leading an enterprise data function and you believe that data as a product, as a philosophy and a framework and a set of behaviors is the right way to do this, then you do have to have the consistent dialogue with other stakeholders and leaders at the organization and say, this is an expectation. When you reach out to us, we're not just going to take your request as you threw it over the wall and then do something and then throw it back over the wall and hope you catch it. It's not the right way for us to work. It doesn't make sure that we're hitting the mark and giving you the value that you need. This is not about a dashboard. This is not about a report. This is not about a model. This is about, what are you trying to do with the information that we're going to give to you in a curated form, right? And so when you start to get into the conversation about like, why do you even have a data team? Like, it's not to churn out reports. Like, it's about providing information to you at the right time in the right context so you can make better decisions. When you kind of change the conversation in that way, it gives your team an allowance, a buffer, so to speak, so they can actually do this pushback, this perceived pushback, or this interrogation of the underlying problem or challenge or opportunity from which a request may come to the group. Right. And so, but it does, like, from a relationship management and relationship building standpoint, it does require a leader like myself to kind of like, hey, let's talk about how this works and why it's working this way. And it's for your benefit. Right. And then the other piece of this that comes to mind, Brian, is like, when you think about all of this work in the context of healthcare, right? And specifically as a healthcare provider in the US. So I guess the US that's where I am. So I kind of speak to that from that perspective. Care delivery is everything for healthcare, right? And so when you think about when you're a data team member at a hospital or a large healthcare system, the biggest, most important objective all the time is to solve the problems and support the folks that are providing care to patients. And the idea of what to do with data and how to maximize the utility of the data team and produce the best, most ambitious analytical endeavors and support those, like, that is a very secondary concern historically. And so that's an interesting dynamic in and of itself, because the clinicians, our nurses, our doctors, our researchers, the folks that are on the front lines of delivering care to our patients and their families, like they don't want to have this pushback. Like they're worried about bigger problems than you like building the right data model to support a subsequent like dashboard or predictive model. And so it takes some maneuvering and definitely some relationship building and trust building, so that they know that when you do say, well, like you said, you need this report, like, and it requires these things, but like, when do you need it? And like, what are you trying to do with that? Is there a better way for us to kind of achieve this goal for you? Can we automate this in some way so that it's not like a reinvention of the wheel every 6 months or whenever the thing requires it? It does require some massaging of that, like dynamic, and making sure that people trust you, specifically on the clinical side.
Yeah. How much of that is the individual data product managers, or whatever your title for the people that kind of oversee these different product initiatives? How much is getting this right their job, doing that on a day-to-day basis, versus you coming in at a senior level and setting some expectations about the throwing it over the wall model and how we're not going to do that? If you had to trade in one of those, tell me about the relative importance of like setting the standard at the leadership and management level about, we're not a data drive-through, so you don't order and then it comes out of the window. No matter what it is, we're going to give it to you in a bag and you're going to drive away. How important is that relative to the individuals doing the pushback work and the day-to-day?
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably more important to think about the latter, but I don't think it's not either or, and I don't mean to dodge the question, because it is both. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you kind of really zoom out and you think about like what I do for a living, I'm a chief data officer. Like the statistics for chief data officers is not good. Like if you think about like their tenure and like the perception of them at organizations, the turnover, and I think, I mean, I have a set of theories about why that is, but my unifying theory is I think that there are varying different definitions of success for a data function at organization, at every function of any scale, right? And the thing about it is like every definition is right to some degree. And so it takes a lot of communication and a lot of clarity and clarifying communication with folks that have differing definition of success, and transparency has to be by default accordingly. Mm-hmm. And so like there's this like that leadership component is important because it has to set the stage for the behavior that comes out of the team. But the behavior is like, I think it's personally, I think it's a way better way of working as an individual contributor, as an analyst, as a data scientist, as a data product manager, as a data engineer, mm-hmm. to be able to take a request and say, does this align with like an objective and key result or a strategic imperative? And how does it align? And what is my role in contributing? Right? I think that's just a better job from my perspective to have than to just, okay, there's the next ticket that came in and let's figure out who has to do work now. So I think it's both, but I don't know that it's, even if I wasn't having like the relationship building and kind of building relationships and helping our leaders and our colleagues understand the way that the group is working, it's still more important. It's sort of like if we're talking about a zero-sum thing, it's still more important that our data team members approach the work in, I think, just like an objectively better way.
Yeah. How are you skilling or hiring for these non-technical skills? Because this, you talked about, I think it's a better way to work and all this, and I'm in fierce agreement over here, cheering inside my head. And then the other, after talking to 150 people on this show, I know that that's not how a lot of analysts and data scientists are wired out of the box. This is not default wiring. Default wiring is, I was paid to develop these complicated models and to do very complicated math and to build these things that no one else can do. And we're going to spend 80% of the time futzing around talking about what we're going to make, and then the 20% of the time making it. Like, this is not default wiring. Now, yeah. I'm stereotyping a whole bunch of class of people that are really sharp, but I just wanted to throw that at you and understand, do you believe in rewiring, or do you like, no, we're going to change how we hire, we're going to hire for different skills, or nope, everyone can be upskilled, bring them in if they have the tech chops, and then we will wire in this new skills. Talk to me about that.
It's interesting. I mean, the folks that you have on your team are incentivized for a variety of reasons. They're incentivized by like the skill set that they bring to the organization and the work that they do, and what has previously provided this sense of value for them as an individual. Like what makes them good at their job? Like they have this coming in, so that's like an implicit sort of like set of motivations. But like you're also motivated by what your boss tells you, right? And so I think this is like, as somebody in my position, as who's again sort of thinking about this as a philosophy that I want to manifest in the data team that I lead, it's about changing the roles and responsibilities of our leaders of our data team, of our data functions. For a long time, particularly in what I would say is like a little bit behind the curve industries like healthcare, the leaders of data functions or analytics functions have been seen as, you have to do everything for this team. You have to gather the right work. You have to mentor these folks. You have to skill them up. You have to continue to coach them. You have to contribute as an individual contributor still. You have to like be hands-on and all these things. And from my perspective, if you think about data as a product, as a function, and you really want to move in this way as an enterprise data function, you have to change the job of the leaders of those data functions. Like it now becomes imperative that they focus on the development of the skills and the capabilities and the capacity of their team, and not about like managing intake and prioritization and like telling people what to do at a given time. You have to make them better at the work itself and not tell them what work to do. Right. And so it's not just a switch you flip. There are moving parts if you want to move in the direction of data as a product and have a data product function as part of the enterprise data team.
Yeah, you described a bunch of project management stuff there, and that's not product management. I remember a time in my career when I was like, it's all the same thing. No, it's not.
It's not. It's not.
It's definitely not the same thing. So this skilling, though, is this, how do you bring them to your individual data leaders, then these different departments you have? Are you hiring people that have some kind of product skilling already, or training them, or how do you develop this skill, especially if they're conceptually like, okay, Bill's smart and he has this point of view that's maybe new to me, or I've heard about this, other teams doing that, but we didn't do it that way. So conceptually they're still figuring it out, and now they're actually supposed to do this work and spread it down to their team. Tell me about, how do you skill for that?
Yeah. I mean, like you have to have a practical approach here. And so one of the things that we've done is like try to introduce practices and behaviors that result in this different approach and ultimately a better set of outcomes and outputs. And so some of the things that come to mind are, you can't be doing off the books work, right? So like all of the things that are being requested of you, they should go through our intake and we should take a look at them. Is there a previously delivered solution that already accounts for X% of this new requested thing, right? That's part of data as a product mindset, right? Let's reuse components. Let's solve complexity as minimally as possible, like as minimal times as possible. Let's modularize our solutions. And so intake is a big deal for us. Like nothing off the books. Like, I know you've been here for 25 years and that radiologist loves you and you know the things that they need all the time. And they go directly to you, not through our ticketing system. But we need to understand what you're doing so that we can leverage all of the amazing work that you're doing across all of the things that you do not see. Right. So it's that type of thing. Another thing that we talk about is having design conversations before development. Right. So which speaks to the heart of data as a product, right? Like you need to think about like, what are you trying to achieve with whatever you need to develop before you start actually writing code? Are you trying to provide specific insight at a certain juncture to a certain set of users? And if so, like how might that look? And let's get clear on how that might look before you start before you start developing rather, because the code that you write may fundamentally change based on whether you need something delivered on a monthly basis or something that aggregates across 40 different dimensions or whatever the thing is. But getting clear on the design is really key for us. So, I mean, there's some of these like these principles that add up to behaviors and outputs and outcomes. That's what we think about.
Do you have designers doing this facilitation, or who does that kind of work?
It's right now it's split across. I mean, we as a nonprofit freestanding pediatric hospital, we don't have all the money to hire all the people we would love to have and fulfill all the roles. Just to kind of state the obvious out loud, and I work at Children's Mercy, as I alluded to earlier. And so accordingly, we have to spread those design responsibilities across our analysts, our data scientists, as well as our data product managers. When our data product managers are involved in the initial interrogation of a potential use case or eliciting requirements, they get involved with design, but they can't be everywhere. And so therefore we have to democratize that skill and that capability across our analysts and our data scientists as well. Mm-hmm. And so we try to help them navigate those conversations so they can shepherd them with our stakeholders.
Got it. Is there a pattern you see when someone from a data background begins doing that work, and they come to you and maybe they complain about something or tell you how difficult this was, and you're like, yep, that's first hump one, and there's 3 more coming, and then it's going to be smooth sailing? Is there a routine or a pattern that you see that this transformation that someone coming from more of a data background has to go through to get to the other side before this is kind of like a normal way of working, and it's not this imposter syndrome, or I don't know if I'm doing it right? These are some of the things that I hear with the teams that I've worked with that come out of data. Is this it's not as clear if you're doing it right as writing code. Did it compile or not? Did it return the right data or not? You get this black and white answers all the time with that kind of work. You don't get that with the fuzzy work of design, interviewing customers, making decisions that are 6 months ahead of where the build is going to be. So any patterns there that you could see and talk about, that's normal and here's how we navigate it, or just kind of inviting an open-ended response?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of muscle memory, especially specifically for folks that have done analytical type work for a long time. And I go back to there's a psychological side to this, which is immutable and non-trivial, which is as a professional, as an analyst, we could use a data analyst as an example, you have probably derived a lot of value for yourself, sort of self-esteem, your place in the professional world, as well as value for your organization by just solving problems as quickly as possible as they're defined by the folks that are asking you for help. There's a lot of value in doing that. Particularly if you're at a small outfit or you're sort of isolated and kind of the one-stop shop for all data and analytics problems and questions. I can see that model works to a certain degree, but when you put that person on an enterprise data function, that muscle memory gets in the way of better work, right? And because what you have to do is, as a member of an enterprise data function, you have to think about, can I reuse previous work? Can my go forward work be more useful than this particular use case? I think that's the biggest thing is we see repetitively this reflex to start the work quickly and not think about the bigger picture because of this psychological component of well, this person needs the thing and I can get this thing faster if I just start working now. I think that's one of the things I see constantly is just starting before we're actually ready to start.
Well, it's the feeling that if you got your code editor open and you're pipelining the data and all this kind of stuff, it feels like progress, right? This is work I can see. If someone asks me where we're at, we were at 0 yesterday and now we're at this. It feels really good.
Yeah.
But it's that sometimes you have to slow down to speed up, to make sure you're delivering quality and not just just an output on a schedule. And we hear, go faster, and there's got to be a way to do this faster, and speed wins, and all these other kind of tropes. And I'm kind of no, benefits win. Ship smaller benefits is okay, but the game is really in outcomes and benefits. It's not in shipping tech outputs faster. That's not helping anybody, and it's actually probably slowing you down over time if you keep repeating it, as you keep having to hold all this legacy code and just baggage that you carry around with you now that it's we built the architecture that way and it was the wrong one because we didn't really know what we were going to do with it, but we built all the plumbing.
That's right.
This is the common engineering versus design argument, and it's not to say you can't start both of them, but I'm always like, I just don't understand how you build good foundation without knowing what you're going to do with it later. And those are usually expensive things to change.
That's right. And I would say in response to that, Brian, really quickly, what comes to mind is a lot of organizations over-index on more analyst type roles, especially when they're growing, right? Because they solve more acute problems, right? And when you focus on more of an analyst type skill set, then you don't get necessarily an engineering mindset or an engineering set of output, right? And so you end up solving complexity many times over, right? And you don't think about foundations. You think about foundation is like a subjective term, right, between different data functions. I think that comes to mind a lot. And as somebody who leads an enterprise data function, I think about my job is like, if I kind of abstract it out, my job is to ensure that we work on the right things all the time. Because like we're surrounded by this finitude, this finite time and resources and labor and capacity. And how do I ensure that my group is doing the right work all the time? And then you solve that problem, but then you have to maximize that capacity. And that's when it gets into like more of an engineering mindset versus like solving every problem on the surface. Right. And that's when you get into foundation building, true foundation building, platform orientation, which goes hand in hand from my perspective with data as a product.
Tell me a little bit about how this is a classic chief data officer problem, but ROI or value creation, at some point economics kick in here, even in the nonprofit space. And I'm wondering, especially like in a hospital, in a care environment like yours, at what tier do you have to think about operational cost savings or whatever the goals are on the financial side? Is this really something for you to aggregate up or to you alone to be thinking about, and you're really focused on improvement and care, like the people below you that are doing the day-to-day project and product work, that they're really focused on care outcomes, but you kind of have to answer to the finance people, so to speak? Or is that everybody's job? And then the attribution problem, which is classic in this space, like, okay, we're recommending this many nurses on these days, and we can predict that -2 days before every national holiday, you want to staff up because people are drinking and blah, blah, blah. Like, you come up with some insight. It's like, well, what's your contribution to the care quality? How do we measure like what that predictive model about staffing was worth? Like, talk to me a little bit about this ROI thing that every chief data officer, I'm sure, is thinking about.
Yeah, there is a chief data officer specific answer I could give, but what I would do is I kind of take a step back. I wear two hats at Children's Mercy. So I'm the chief data officer, and so by and large, I'm responsible for the enterprise data and analytics strategy and AI strategy. But I also lead our enterprise program management office and our office of change management. And so that is not technical, and that is not a typical chief data officer set of responsibilities, as far as I could see. And so what that does for me is like it inextricably links my group to the value of the work that we do. So by virtue of being able to lead the enterprise program management office and office of change management, I'm responsible for the goal setting framework for the organization at large. So our OKR program from the top all the way down to frontline leaders, and that connectivity and that interconnectivity, the cascading nature and the laddering up, all of that is like part of a program that I help lead with my group. And it gives me a front row seat to like, what is the shared definition of success for everybody? Like, what could I possibly point my group to as a data leader that would produce the right output, the right outcomes at the right time to drive the right strategy and the right direction for the hospital at large, right? So I often say this. I feel like I'm the dog that caught the car, right? Because for the longest time, as a chief data officer, as a leader of an enterprise data function, I've always wanted my group to be tied to the right work at the right time and make sure that I have visibility into that. And now I get to see that, the inner workings of that, and kind of build that machine and then latch on the data and analytics functions and our AI strategy to all of those articulations of success across the hospital. which gets to your point, right? Like when you think about how do we really move the needle for care delivery? If we're trying to improve like wait times for the emergency room, or trying to optimize, discharge for inpatient, or improve the quality of care and reduce infections across a number of different departments and units, like I know exactly what our leaders are trying to achieve from that perspective. And then the challenge for the data function is how do we do the right work, build the right solutions, and deploy the right products that drive those outcomes. But I get like maximum clarity on the outcomes that we need to shoot for, which is great.
I guess my question though is in the attribution of like when there's a multidisciplinary team involved, there's the people that can actually operationalize this down in the emergency room or whatever. Is this a internal debate and it's just one you have to swallow, or you kind of like, no, we don't worry about attribution of the value that we created to, for the hospital, et cetera. I know this is a lingering problem for a lot of data teams, is that especially when it's kind of ephemeral, like decision support information, like what's that worth to know how to staff better or when to whatever the use case may be. How do you think about that?
So the ROI specifically on the output of the data team, is that what we're?
Yeah, like the credit. How do you figure out like, well, we had to talk to the Office of Change Management, and then there's the operational people who are going to actually make behavioral changes in the real world. The data team who provided the insights to do any of that. Like, how do we know what our contribution to this was? And especially if it's like some big thing, it's like, oh my gosh, we've been able to we need half as many doctors on call because we found out half of them weren't being used, and we don't need that many on call anymore. So we're saving money and our care delivery is the same. So but what's our credit, Or are you like, no, that's like the wrong game to play in the first place? That's a fair argument too, but tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that there are some scenarios and some projects and initiatives where it's much more linear and it's like you can see the cause and effect. But for much of the work that we do, it's a little bit of a leap of faith, right? You think about data as driving better decisions to get better data to drive better decisions, like the cyclical flywheel, so to speak, right? And I think that's an ethos that we have as an organization, and most organizations do have that claim to be data driven. And so it's a little bit of a leap of faith to say that if we use data to improve this outcome, then that's going to be a better thing empirically for us or for our customers or for our patients or what have you. I think, and then there are definitive outcomes that the data team can support, right? So if we do a bottleneck analysis of the experience of our patients that become inpatients, right? From the time they enter the emergency room to the time that they are discharged, can we optimize staffing and can we optimize care delivery and the patient experience in a way that then shrinks the amount of time that they spend as a patient, which is a good outcome for them, right? That everybody wants to achieve for that patient and their family. That's the objective. And we can do work analytically to drive that better outcome. And so I think that's whenever we can do that and we kind of create that very distinct and explicit connectivity to the work, we do that. But again, it's there is an underlying ethos that says throw the data team at the problem, identify some success criteria, drive analytical endeavors towards those success criteria, and that is a win. So I think that it's not always linear, but it's there are ways to create connectivity.
Yeah. You talked about AI a couple times here. I wanted to kind of end in this space. So I was thinking about our conversation. So I think I was in for a soccer injury or something, and I had to go to my PCP to get a referral for PT and all this kind of jazz. And so they're using an AI note taker in the room now.
Yeah.
And I think the nurse was asking me something about how I'm doing and how's the family doing. And I find myself mentioning, I'm probably making some of this up at this point. Oh yeah, my kid was home sick with a cold and da-da-da-da. And then in my head, I'm like, because they had gotten permission to use this note taker. I'm like, wait a second. So now it's going to say I am in here for a cold and an ankle roll and a whatever. And I'm just starting to think about the data that's coming in. And Is this person going to actually read the transcript and correct all the notes? Or are they just oh, great, someone else is the bot's going to take care of the notes. So I was thinking about our conversation and actually On a very tactical, just selfish or curious question that's probably easy for you, like, is your team involved in, like, when you bring a tool in like that, is the data team involved in deciding like whether or not to onboard a third party? Because I'm sure they didn't build this in-house. My guess is this is a bolt-on to the EHR or some third-party application that specializes in natural language processing and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Do you guys get involved in those kinds of buy decisions?
We do. This is a very timely question on your part, Brian. Like, we are actually we are actively moving to a new electronic health record.
Okay.
In the coming months. So, and part of our go live deployment with the electronic health record is this bolt-on ambient listening technology that allows for us to capture the encounter notes, the clinical notes, and then make sense of them, right? And so, like, we as a data team, we have a stake in how to make sense of that data, right? And we are definitely involved, because what we want to do is we want to take that information, that unstructured information, and turn it into useful insights going forward. And so that manifests across a variety of different contexts, both in operationally and clinically.
Yeah. Is your team actively running generative AI experiments in-house? And what's your philosophy there? I know there's some which find really high value use cases and kind of go in all on that. There's let's find 10 small experiments that don't require us to boil the infrastructure ocean, so to speak, and try to see if we can provide some value in a small way. Do you have like or maybe you're not doing anything with this, with HIPAA and all the other challenges that are in the healthcare space, but talk to me a little bit about your AI work.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, we were looking at a number of features. We've adopted some features already. We have our enterprise chatbot through Microsoft. So we've deployed that 15 months ago or so, and looking to further prove out the utility of that and increase adoption, because we think there's a lot of efficiencies to be gained from a productivity standpoint. But from more of a clinical and operational standpoint, yes, we're looking at a lot of different things that are built into the electronic health record system. Things like note summarization. From a data and analytics standpoint, there's a couple different features that allow for us to summarize dashboards and views that are built into the application. Right. So, like, it's a little bit of like a translation type feature. Like, so a normal
talk to your data. Yeah.
A responsibility of an analyst. You could just kind of say, well, like, what is this telling me? And what can I summarize? What can I put into a slide deck? Or there's natural language querying as part of that as well, built into the application that we're deploying soon. And then there are things like translation capabilities through large language models, which is incredibly important in terms of the patient experience,
right? Especially
for historically marginalized cohorts of patients and their families. So, I think there's a lot to be gained by looking at Gen AI features that are being built into the workflows.
Is that changing any of the kind of the product way of working? Is this kind of like you could keep throwing new technology in and it's not going to change our underlying ethos? You're like, no, this is actually different enough that we are changing how we work. Any comments on that?
It's interesting. It depends on what angle you're thinking about. The angle that's very top of mind for me is our users, our stakeholders, our colleagues across the hospital are going to increasingly use things like Copilot to interpret information. Right. And so some of that is actual data, and like they'll, ad hoc visualizations and ad hoc analyses that they can get out of these tools. And what does that do for the roles and responsibilities for the data team? And, I think I think it's okay. That's a form of self-service enablement. But what it does to me is it heightens the importance of us having the right governance, capturing the right metadata, creating the right taxonomy, so that when we do have folks that kind of go off and do their own self-services with these tools, like, it's attached to a knowledge graph that can make sense of the information for them without having somebody hold their hand. Right. So I think about it, it increases the complexity of the ask from the data team perspective, my perspective, making sure that foundation is more solid, because they're not going to reach out to an analyst to get an ad hoc question answered anymore. They're going to just go to a tool. So what can we do to prepare for that reality?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Bill, this has been great. Do you have any closing thoughts you want to give to? We have a lot of people in data product management roles and leadership roles in this space that I know are always trying to find things they can take away from our guests and apply to their own environments. But any just closing thoughts you wanted to share with them?
Yeah, certainly. I think what I would say is I would invest as much as possible as a data team in literacy programs for your colleagues, your stakeholders, your users, helping them understand how to use data, how to request information from the data team. I think it's really important to kind of help them understand how to best leverage the resources they have at their disposal in their organization. Historically, what I've seen is like we don't do a good job of communicating like how the data team can most derive value from the information and the data that we acquire as an organization. I think just helping folks understand how to best utilize the data team it would be a really great approach from my perspective.
Thank you for that advice. Bill Saltmarsh, where can people find you? You have a great last name, probably not a lot of those, right? So I know you're on LinkedIn. Is that the best place to connect with you?
Yeah, that's the best place. I think so. Yeah.
Cool. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on Experiencing Data. It's been wonderful to chat with you, and thanks for sharing all your experiences with us.
Happy to do it, Brian. Thanks for the conversation.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Experiencing Data with Brian O'Neill. If you did enjoy it, please consider sharing it with the hashtag #ExperiencingData. To get future podcast updates or to subscribe to Brian's mailing list, where he shares his insights on designing valuable enterprise data products and applications, visit designingforanalytics.com/podcast.